Hey folks, welcome to my October 2020 hobby update. So this is everything I've been doing over the last month, painting wise for myself. So this month is actually a little different to the last couple of months, and if you want to catch up on previous things I've doing, I've got a playlist up at the top here for my previous hobby updates. But this one I've been focusing primarily on one particular army, trying to get that done in preparation for some gaming I want to do in the future, and this is it. So this is my pseudo-African army. It's what I call the Shoshan in my historical fiction. It's made up of two separate parts. So obviously the first part is the Zulus. So we've got 4 units of Zulus. Yeah, this is obviously set up for the Rampant game. So we've got Lion and Dragon Rampant here. But the intention is to use these figures for other games as well. So for example, the Zulus I would use in colonial gaming and the Numidians in ancient gaming. But this particular setup is for Lion and Dragon Rampant. I haven't decided which. I mean, they're basically the same rule set, so it doesn't really matter. But I'll go through it, and then you can see sort of the idea behind it. So, first of all, to give you a little background information, this is what I call my Shoshan natives. So, in the sort of narrative that I'm running, we're going to have a separate campaign where sort of a early to mid medieval army is looking to invade the territory and take over the natural resources that this faction has. And then obviously use some of their infantry as tribal allies for future conquests. That's, of course, if they succeed. So I wanted a sort of a representation of how this army fights, and that's representative by their background. So it's all made up. It's nothing set in any sort of history or anything. So I kind of thought of them as semi-nomadic tribes, where they have each sort of tribe would have 2 or 3, maybe even 4 areas that they would spend sort of a season in, and they would raise livestock and raise crops and stuff like that in those areas, and then the following season move to a new area and sort of do the same thing there. They travel from one area to an area, so they don't have specific sort of villages or cities, but they do have 1 or 2 major cities where the king and nobility live and that sort of thing. So the majority of the army is going to made up of these troops right here, which are representative for the Zulus. So I've got 4 units of light infantry or foot yeomen, and they all armed with light armor and javelins. So the faction doesn't use range weapon as such. They have all very short range weaponry, and not a lot of armor, as the area they live in is predominantly warm, and so they move around a lot. They can't be laden down with lots of heavy armor and things like that, and they use speed and mobility to basically fight their other tribes and invading armies like the medieval army that will be facing them. So as I said, 4 units of light infantry with javelins, and then over here in the middle, this will be sort of some of the standing troops that they have. This comes from sort of the main cities where the nobility lives. This is the commander figure that I have. It's a warlord Zulu chieftain. It's the one I'm using at the moment as a commander, but I'm looking to get some more elaborate commanders for the future. Some more interesting sort of kingly models, and then I'll use these as generals for the armies. That sort of stuff will come later in the campaign, and I'll explain those sort of things then. But I'm just giving you a general idea. So these are the Victrix Namidian infantry. I'm using them as heavy infantry or foot sergeants. They're kind of the palace guard, if you like. So these would be the bodyguard of the nobility. They're really nice figures actually to paint. This is some of the heavy infantry I did this year. I've kept the scheme in terms of skin color and basing color the same as the Zulus, even though there's obviously roughly about 2,000 years difference between the Zulus and the Namidians in terms of timeline, and technically the Numidians would have a lighter color scheme, I would imagine, being from North Africa, as opposed to the Zulus, which are from Southern Africa. But I kept the skin tones similar so they can tie in together. The basing is kept similar. And then also I've done a couple of things, like for example the Zulus on their beads and arm guards and things like that, and the leg tassels. I did a similar color scheme to a lot of the tunics from the Numidians. So it just sort of vaguely ties them in all together, makes them sort of more of a cohesive force. I try to keep most of them with javelins as well, because as you can imagine, they're going to be armed with javelins. I just had the leader with a sword, so there's not many swords and axes and those type of things in the army. They're predominantly lightly armored, all with light javelins and spears and those type of things, just to keep the coherency amongst the army. So you got 1 heavy infantry, 4 light infantry, which makes up the bulk of the army, and then over here, which is also from Victrix, is the elephant. Now, obviously, in Lion Rampant, there are no elephant or beast profiles, so I'm using the Greater Warbeast profile from Dragon Rampant, and I'll probably give it a spore attack upgrade. So the spore attack being javelins. Yes, there might be a theme running through here. So obviously, this is also the Victrix model. I've based it on a really big base because I wanted it to stand out from the rest. I obviously added a little javelineer guy on the front, on the foot, just to add a little more presence on the base. But I was umming and ahhing whether I wanted to do it on such a big base, because it's technically, for any game, I don't think they're based on that bigger bases. But as I'm going to be playing predominantly with my friends at home and that sort of thing, so it doesn't really matter. And it stands out, as you can see, if you look at it, definitely is the centerpiece of the army. And then over here, and also little big men transfers for all the shields and stuff, and I went for specific ones. So this one is obviously just the one that comes with the elephant from Victrix anyway. These ones, I wanted the yellow and black sort of look. I actually originally wanted all the same shields, but in the end I just went for they have a mixture of shields, which is fine, it's not a big deal. But over here on the Numidian Cavalry, as you can see, this is a 1 full pack of 12 guys. I went for the sort of what I call the African shields. So you got like giraffe skin pelts, zebra skin pelts, those type of things over the top of the leather shields and stuff like that. I think that looked really cool. It also tied in with the rest of the army that I wanted, as opposed to, say, the shields, which had these sort of patterns. And so that was my thinking there. I also did a couple of head swaps with these. Not too many. I only did, I think, 4 out of the 12, just to give them a little different appearance. So, for example, this one over here, you've got a Zulu head on the top there from Warlord, and I think it works fine. I mean, it's obviously not maybe 100% historically correct, who knows, but I can't imagine that every single Namidian had the same type of hair throughout the entire nation, so I'm sure it'll be fine. And then I also tied in the color schemes there as well. Like, for example, all the banners have this sort of black and tan color scheme that ties in with, say, for example, the Zulus little skirt things. So that's kind of how I tied it together. So this, as I was saying, it's two different versions. You've got the Zulus on one side, the Namidians on the right. Together they make my historical fiction army called the Shoshan, which will be my African army. So they got no heavy cavalry. They're all lightly armed troops. The heaviest units they got is obviously the heavy infantry over here, and the Warbeast or the elephant over there. Those are their 2 heavy hitters, if you like. Everything is armed with javelins, so they all have a lot of short-range weaponry. I think it'll be interesting to play this army. I had a sort of 1 demo game with it with my friend Mick. We started off a game, just a practice game, and I was using them, and I found them very interesting to play. I know in the rules you're not supposed to have more than, say, 12 points of a certain unit, or more than 4 units of the same unit, or something like that. I'm foregoing that, it's because obviously this is a very theme narrative perspective, so it doesn't really apply here. And I'm not going for some sort of dirty combo or anything. It was more of a narrative choice. And I think it worked quite well. It was interesting to play. It was tough. I mean, they don't hit very hard. They were very much a sort of an attrition style army. The elephant obviously played a big role in taking out some heavier units. And you try and pick nickel and dime units with the javelins and absorb charges, those type of things. So it'll be interesting to play, I think. Anyway, so that's roughly about 34, 36 points of this. And as with normal with my armies, if you're familiar with my channel and my sort of army building style, uh, everything I want here is usable in other games and other rule sets that I want to use. And then I also try and add some elements to it that make it maybe a little fantastical. So over here, you can see these good friend, Martin Cairns. I want to give him a shout out. He's printed these off for me and sent them to me, and they look fantastic. They are, I believe, from Titan Forge, which is a miniature company, but they do 3D printed miniatures. So you buy the STL files and then you can print them off yourself. I don't have a 3D printer, but they may be a little Aztec-y, but it's fine. I think with the right sort of paint scheme and similar basing to the rest of the army, they will fit in nicely to add a fantastical element if I wanted to play Dragon Rampant straight off. So that's going to be a sort of a pseudo add-on to a third element to the army. And then over here you can see these huts over here. This is going to be some of the villages that they will be using in the games. In the rules that I'm going to be using, I have sort of army campments. So for example, the medieval army are going to be using these as their army campments, and those ones are going to be for the Shoshan. These are from Simon or Kulminionot or whatever you want to call them now, and these were from the board game Hate. They're plastic tents for the board game Hate. I think they'll work perfectly fine for this. And again, with my ethos of using things in multiple ways, obviously I can use that in the board game Hate, and obviously for them as their villages, and also just generic terrain when I'm playing fantasy games with barbarians or whatever. So that works for me. So that is what I've been working on this month. As it happened, from the previous month I had the 4th unit of Zulus to complete. They were only base coded last month, so 4th unit of Zulus is finished, and then I painted up the elephant, both units of cavalry, and this heavy infantry unit for this month. And that's that. I don't have any gubbins or anything like that to add extra. This is literally all I did this month. I had lots of work to do in terms of the commissions and things. So if you want to check those out, you can follow the link in the show notes below to my Facebook page, Painting Nights. And that's that. If you have any ideas or sort of thoughts of the army and things I could add or that sort of stuff, comment below. I'm already thinking about, a friend of mine found me some interesting Hyena models. I think they're from Foundry. Were they from Foundry? I can't remember now. But I'm thinking of getting them to form like a lesser Warbeast unit. That'll obviously be a greater Warbeast unit in Dragon Rampant. This is the stereotypical type of army that you would not... that's maybe not correct. But when you're playing Dragon Rampant, you can use whatever you want and fit them in any way you want. And this particular army I don't think would work very well in most systems because it's so agnostic. But for Dragon Rampant it works fine. And I might even be able to shoehorn this into Oathmark. Who knows? See how that goes. Anyway, thanks for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed it. And tell me what you think of the army and how the project is going. And I'll talk more in the future about the campaign that I'm planning to do. So, see you guys later.